What does it even mean to be a good worker nowadays?
Hey, this is Steve Bick with the Forest Business
question.
School. Thank you for listening to the FBS
We're going through these
podcast, and I
interviews
hope
done
you
by
will
the Forest
subscribe.
Business School.
Right.
The
I don't
truth
know if
is,
you're
these
familiar with
deep
them.
dives
Yeah, I've heard of
barely
them.
scratch
They do
the
a lot of,
surface
like,
of some of the topics we
training
cover
programs for
in the Forest Business
forestry
School
professionals,
programs.
especially
But the
business
podcast
owner
is my
side
way
things.
of
But anyway,
reaching
they did this
a
series of
wider
interviews
audience with
for
these
their
ideas.
FBS podcast.
Check out our
or whatever.
website
cool.
at
And they were asking about changing
vtfbs.com
expectations
for more
Okay,
information.
interesting.
for
Reach out
employees.
if you want to talk about one of the
And
FBS
some of the stuff
programs,
these folks
or
were
you
saying,
have some
Yeah.
custom
It was pretty
training or
eye-opening,
short courses
honestly.
in mind.
Like what?
Again,
What were some of the things
thanks
that
for
stood
listening
out
to
to
the
you?
FBS
well,
podcast.
for one, like the people they talked to,
Yeah.
they weren't just like, one type of person.
Right.
It was sawmill owners,
Okay.
loggers.
Got it.
They even had a production manager in there.
Interesting.
It wasn't just like a biased thing,
Yeah. So you're getting a range of perspectives then.
Exactly.
That's good to have that kind of mix.
And one of the big things that kept coming up
Yeah.
was this whole idea of like an honest day's work.
An honest day's work.
Well, like that's what everybody wants,
Yeah,
right?
you would think that's a given.
But they were saying that it's like not a given anymore.
Really?
And there was this one production manager who was saying like, what she thinks of as an honest day's work
Okay.
might not be how her younger employees see it.
Huh. Now that's fascinating.
Like there's this disconnect.
Right. Yeah.
Makes you wonder if it's like a generational thing.
Yeah. Could be. I mean, is it a different work ethic?
Yeah.
Or is it just different expectations about like what work even is?
Right. Or maybe it's communication too.
Oh, yeah, for sure. How you talk about it all.
Like you can't just assume everybody's on the same page, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
You have to be really intentional about communication these days.
And it's not just like the big picture stuff either.
What do you mean?
Well, they were talking about these like really basic things.
Okay.
Like there was this one logger
Yeah.
who was saying
Yeah.
that he literally has to coach his sons,
On what?
like how to shake somebody's hand properly
Wow.
or look people in the eye when you talk to them.
You kidding?
Nope. Like he felt like he had to teach them that stuff
Mm.
because it's not just about knowing how to run the equipment or whatever.
Right.
It's all these other skills, these like soft skills.
Yeah, those are huge.
Communication and being reliable and all that.
Totally. And in a world where technology is changing so fast, like those human skills,
Yeah.
they become even more important.
Because you can't automate that.
Exactly. You need people who can think critically, solve problems.
Be adaptable.
Exactly.
All right, but here's where it gets really interesting.
Okay. I'm listening.
So you'd think that, like,
Yeah. Yeah.
if you want to get people to be better workers, you just incentivize it, right?
Yeah. Well, yeah. I mean, that's kind of the classic approach, isn't it?
Like bonus pay if you show up on time, bonus pay if you meet production goals.
Right. Seems pretty
But
straightforward.
a few of these business owners,
Uh-huh.
they were saying that it can actually backfire.
Oh, really? How so?
Like sometimes it just makes people focus on the money
Okay.
and not on actually doing a good job.
So they're just kind of gaming the system.
Yeah, and it can create this weird division, too.
Oh, I can see that.
Like between the people who are busting their butts for the bonus.
Right.
And the ones who are like, whatever, I'm just going to do the bare minimum.
Yeah, that's not good for team morale.
No, and this one manager even said it almost caused like a war on the factory floor.
A war? Seriously?
Yeah, people were getting really resentful of each other.
Wow, that's a bit extreme.
And it's all because of how they were trying to like incentivize good work.
Huh. So it's like you have to be really careful about how you design these incentives.
Yeah, you can't just assume it's going to work out the way you think it will.
Right, and it's got to be fair to everybody.
Totally. Otherwise, you're just creating more problems.
Exactly. You can end up actually hurting morale instead of helping it.
And then there's this other thing that kept coming up too.
What's that?
It was this idea of loyalty.
Loyalty.
Yeah, like the human resources manager was saying he felt like.
Yeah.
Younger workers today, they just don't have that same sense of loyalty.
To the company.
Exactly.
Interesting. Like they're not as invested in it.
Right. And he was kind of comparing it to like the old days
Okay.
where a job was more than just a paycheck.
Yeah, it was about being part of something bigger.
Right. Like you've stuck with a company for years. You built your career there.
Makes you wonder if that's just like a thing of the past now.
Yeah. And maybe it's because of all the remote work
Yeah, that could be a factor.
and the gig economy and all that stuff.
That makes it easier to jump around, from job to job.
So maybe that whole idea of like building a career with one company,
It's just not as appealing anymore.
or maybe it's just not realistic for a lot of people.
That's true, too. The job market's a lot different these days.
Okay, but this next one, this is really going to blow your mind.
Oh, boy. What is it?
It's about communication.
Okay, I'm intrigued.
So several of these business owners were saying
Uh-huh.
texting.
Texting.
That's how a lot of younger workers prefer to communicate.
Even for important stuff.
Even for important stuff.
Really?
Like if there's a problem
Yeah.
or they need to, like, resolve a conflict with somebody.
They'd rather text about it than talk face to face.
Yep.
Huh. I mean, I guess it makes sense in a way.
How so?
Well, we're all so used to communicating digitally these days.
True.
It's easy. It's quick.
Yeah, but sometimes you need that nuance,
Oh, absolutely. Like tone of voice and all that.
And it's so easy for things to get lost in translation when you're just texting.
You're telling me I've had so many misunderstandings because of that.
Oh, I know.
It's like you can't always tell what someone's really thinking or feeling.
And one of the managers even said that some of her employees would text her during their lunch break.
About work stuff.
Yep. Instead of just, like, popping their head in her office.
Huh. That's interesting.
It's like, is that a lack of respect?
Yeah, or are they just more comfortable expressing themselves in writing?
I don't know. Maybe they're just trying to avoid confrontation.
Could be. Or maybe they just don't see it as a big deal.
It definitely raises some questions about how different generations view communication.
Yeah, and how that plays out in the workplace.
But, yeah, sometimes it's not just about generational differences.
What do you mean?
Well, one of the sawmill owners was saying that
Yeah.
his own approach to managing expectations and communication,
Okay.
he was calling it a disaster.
Oh, wow, really?
And this was like back in his early days of running the business. He wasn't just talking about younger employees either.
So it was kind of across the board.
Yeah, he was just like not doing a good job of communicating with anybody.
Well, at least he recognized that.
Right? He was being really self-aware about it.
It's huge.
Like he realized that he needed to change how he was doing things.
Yeah, you have to be able to adapt, right?
And be more in tune with what each individual employee needs.
Absolutely. Not everybody responds to the same approach.
It's almost like you need a whole toolbox of communication styles these days.
It's true. You got to be flexible.
And speaking of communication, this other thing came up too.
Yeah.
About how you give feedback,
Okay.
especially constructive criticism.
Right.
Like how you tailor that to each person.
Yeah. That's a delicate art, for sure.
Because not everybody takes criticism the same way.
Absolutely not. Some people get really defensive.
And others just, like, shut down completely.
You really have to know your audience.
And figure out what's going to be most effective for them.
Right. What's actually going to help them grow.
Without making them feel attacked or anything.
Exactly. It's a fine line to walk.
It really is. And that's just one of the many challenges these business owners are facing.
I bet. Managing people is never easy.
But it's fascinating to hear their insights,
Yeah, it gives you a lot to think about.
And hopefully it can help other people too.
For sure. We can all learn from each other's experiences.
Definitely.
Yeah. It's like you have to know how to talk to each person,
Right.
and figure out what's going to work for them.
Yeah. And it's like even the idea of what constructive criticism is.
Oh, totally.
Like how you and I might think of it versus how somebody coming into the workforce now might see it.
Yeah.
That could be totally different.
Well, and this one consultant, he was a forester.
Okay.
He was saying that a lot of younger workers,
Yeah.
they take any kind of criticism super personally.
Really?
Yeah, like instead of it being a chance to learn and grow,
Right.
they just see it as like an attack.
Like they're not good enough.
Right. And you have to wonder, is that just like how raising kids now?
It could be.
Like with all this emphasis on self-esteem and
Yeah.
not wanting to hurt anybody's feelings or whatever.
Right.
Are we like accidentally making it harder for them to handle like setbacks in life
That's a really good point.
and like learn from their mistakes?
Yeah, because if you never screw up, you never figure out how to do it better.
Right. Exactly. I mean, you got to make mistakes to learn.
And maybe it's also just how different generations learn and process things.
Yeah, like it's not about one being right and one being wrong.
Right.
It's just that they have different approaches.
And some people are really good at figuring that out,
Oh, yeah.
Like one of the sawmill owners was saying, he's got this employee
Oh, okay.
and he's learned that, like, instead of giving him a whole big task all at once, which can feel overwhelming, he breaks it down into these little steps.
Well, that's smart.
And the guy's like way more productive now
I bet. Yeah.
because he's not just like frozen by this huge thing he has to do.
Right. It feels more manageable that way.
And he was also talking about being really careful about how he gives feedback,
Okay.
like making sure it's helpful, not just critical.
Oh, for sure. That's so important.
Like, you don't want to make the guy feel bad. You want to help him get better.
Exactly. And that shows real leadership, recognizing that you got to tailor your approach to each person.
And it's not just about, like, how you talk to people either.
What do you mean?
Well, one of the loggers was telling this story
Okay.
about how he tried this bonus system, for production.
Right.
And on paper, it sounded great.
I bet. Yeah.
Like everybody would make more money if they just produced more.
Seems simple enough.
But it totally backfired.
Really? What happened?
It just created all this tension.
Oh, I can see that.
Like some people felt pressured
Yeah.
and resentful, like they couldn't keep up.
Mm-hmm.
And then other people were just like, whatever.
And they just kept doing the bare minimum. So it
Minimum.
didn't actually motivate them to work harder.
And one guy even quit. Yeah, he said the pressure was just too much.
Wow.
So it's like, even when you think you're doing something good,
Yeah,
it can have these like unintended consequences.
absolutely. And that's why it's so important too. Like,
Yeah.
think about how these programs actually affect people.
You can't just throw money at a problem and expect it to go away.
Right. You got to consider the culture of the company, the personalities of the people who work there.
And what actually motivates them.
Yeah, because it's not always about money.
It's about feeling valued, being part of a team.
Right. Like this one production manager was saying,
Mhm.
she was talking about how important it is to create this feeling of like, we're all in this together.
That's such a good point.
Like a shared purpose,
Right, because when you feel like you're part of something bigger,
Yeah,
you're going to be more invested in it.
exactly. And you're going to work harder because it matters.
But it's hard,
What is?
to create that kind of feeling these
I
days.
know what you mean.
Like with everybody working remotely.
Yeah, and the traditional workplace is kind of disappearing.
And this one logger he was talking about,
Mm-hmm.
he was comparing like his sons
Okay.
to the Hispanic laborers he's worked with on dairy farms.
Okay.
And he was saying that like the Hispanic workers were way more willing to take on responsibility.
Oh, that's interesting.
And they had this like amazing work ethic.
It makes you think about how
Yeah,
different cultures view work,
totally.
Like we have to be careful about making generalizations,
Mm-hmm.
but it's clear that there are
Yeah,
different values and expectations around the world.
and that's okay.
Yeah, it's not about one being better than the other. It's
Right.
about understanding those differences.
And respecting them.
Exactly. And that's where like
Yeah,
empathy and cultural sensitivity, those are really important for leaders to have.
because you're going to be working with people from all over.
Totally. Especially in a globalized world.
And you got to be able to like,
Connect with them and understand where they're coming from.
absolutely. It's about building bridges.
Right.
Creating a workplace where everyone feels valued.
No matter where they're from or what their background is.
That's a powerful message, honestly.
Yeah. And it's not just for forestry.
Right? It applies to any business.
But let's not forget, we are talking about forestry here.
Yeah. And that comes with its own unique challenges.
Totally.
Like it's physically demanding work.
Mm.
It can be dangerous,
Yeah. And it's not easy to find people who want to do that kind of work.
especially when there's so many other options out there.
And it's like a lot of younger workers today, they're not looking to settle down in one career.
Right. They want to try different things, have experiences.
So how do you attract people to an industry that requires like real skill and dedication?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it?
It is, but you can tell these business owners are really thinking about it.
Oh, yeah.
They're trying different things.
Like different incentive programs,
Well,
different communication styles.
That's good. You got to experiment.
Yeah. And see what works.
And that willingness to adapt.
Yeah.
That gives me hope,
Me too.
Like they're not stuck in their ways. They're open to new ideas.
And they know they have to change.
Yeah, if they want to survive.
And that's what these conversations are all about, right?
What do you mean?
Like figuring out how to bridge the gap
Between what employers expect?
and what employees are looking for.
Yeah, it's about finding that common ground
Understanding each other's perspectives
and working together.
to create something better.
Absolutely. I couldn't have said it better myself. It's like they get it.
They know things are changing.
And they're trying to figure out how to keep up.
Which is smart because if you don't change, you get left behind, right?
Exactly. The world's not standing still.
And one thing they kept talking about
Yeah.
was investing in their employees.
Oh, yeah. That's huge.
Like giving them opportunities to learn new things.
Right. Helping them grow.
And that's something the Forest Business School really pushes too.
I bet. That makes sense.
Because if you're an employee
Yeah.
and you feel like your company's investing in you,
Mm-hmm.
You're going to be more invested in the company.
Totally. You're going to care more about your job.
And you're going to want to do a good job.
And you're going to be learning new skills along the way.
Exactly. So it's a win-win for everybody.
The employee gets more knowledge.
The company gets a better employee.
It's a smart strategy for sure.
But it's not just about, like, technical skills.
What else is there?
It's also about those soft skills we were talking about.
Oh, right. Communication, problem solving, all that stuff.
Yeah, because those are the things that really make a difference.
No matter what job you have.
Exactly. Like, even if you decide to leave forestry and do something completely different.
Those skills are still going to be valuable.
So it's not just about, like, meeting the needs of the company.
Right.
It's about helping people build their careers.
Right. And become more well-rounded individuals.
And that's something I think a lot of employers forget about.
It's easy to get caught up in the day-to-day, you know?
Yeah. And just focus on getting the work done.
But you got to take a step back sometimes.
And think about the bigger picture.
And these conversations, they're good for that. They make you think about things differently.
Because it's not just about forestry, you know?
What do you mean?
It's about how the whole world of work is changing.
That's a good point.
And how we all need to adapt.
Employers and employees.
Everybody.
And it comes down to some pretty basic things, really.
Like what?
Communication, empathy.
Being willing to see things from other people's perspective.
Exactly.
And being open to change.
Because the one constant is that things are always changing.
And if you're not willing to change with them,
you're going to get left behind.
So I think the big takeaway here is we all need to be having these conversations.
About what it means to be a good worker.
What it means to be a good leader.
How to create workplaces where everybody can thrive.
Because that's how we're going to build a better future.
For everybody, absolutely.
And that's what it's all about, right?
It is.
Hey, this is Steve Bick with the Forest Business School. Thanks for listening to the FBS podcast, and I hope you will subscribe. The truth is, these deep dives barely scratch the surface of some of the topics we cover in the Forest Business School programs, and the podcast is a way of reaching a wider audience. Check out my website at vtfbs.com for more information. Reach out if you want to talk about one of the FBS programs or have custom training or project needs that you'd like to discuss. Again, thanks for listening to the FBS podcast.